He was the canine equivalent of solitary confinement, relegated to the caution row at the back of the overcrowded county shelter. Kennel card clipped prominently to his door. The word aggressive stood out in bold, unforgiving red letters. A scarlet, branding him as dangerous, untouchable, essentially unadoptable. He was a powerfully built pit bull mix, cropped ears giving him a severe look some found intimidating, his broad chest and muscular frame rippling with tension beneath his brindle coat. When anyone approached his kennel, the reaction was explosive and terrifying. Deep, guttural growls erupted from his chest, followed by frantic lunging against the chain-link door, teeth bared in a fearsome display, barking echoing harshly off the concrete walls. Potential adopters took one look, heard the cacophony, saw the sign, and hurried past, hearts pounding, reinforcing the shelter staff's weary assessment. He was Tank, a name perhaps given for his build, but now seemingly descriptive of his explosive reactions. He was widely considered aggressive, a liability, a dog whose time was tragically running out. But behind the bars, beyond the terrifying sounds and the intimidating posture, a different story was unfolding. One written in the subtle language of canine body language, tragically misinterpreted by most while Tank lunged forward. His body weight was often paradoxically shifted backward, coiled like a spring ready to recoil further. While his teeth were bared, his lips were pulled back tightly in a fearful grimace, not a confident offensive posture. His eyes, wide and darting, showed the whites, the classic whale eye, indicating extreme stress and anxiety. And beneath the intimidating display, if one looked closely enough, a fine tremor often shook his powerful frame. Tank wasn't launching an attack. He was desperately trying to create distance, to ward off perceived threats, in the only way he knew how. His aggression was a mask, a desperate, frantic defense mechanism, born not of malice, but of profound, deep-seated fear. No one knew the exact details of Tank's past before he was picked up as a stray, already bearing physical scars, faint white lines on his muzzle and legs, the cropped ears, a slight hesitation in his gait, suggesting an old injury. But the psychological scars ran far deeper. His reactions strongly suggested a history involving severe mishandling, abuse, or terrifying confinement. Perhaps he'd been kept perpetually chained, lunging becoming his only way to react to approach. Perhaps he'd been actively tormented, learning that humans approaching meant pain. Perhaps he was a victim of fight training or baiting, where aggression was forced and fear was a constant companion. Whatever the specifics, his past had taught him that closeness to humans, sudden movements, loud noises, and confined spaces equaled danger. The shelter environment, with its constant noise, strangers peering in, and lack of escape routes, was his worst nightmare realized, triggering his terrified defenses into overdrive. He was trapped in a cycle. His fear manifested as behaviors perceived as aggressive, which in turn isolated him further, deepening his fear and sealing his fate. Most staff members, overworked and dealing with dozens of animals, simply didn't have the time or specialized training to look beyond the obvious danger signals. They followed protocol, caution sign, minimal handling, placement on the urgent list due to behavioral concerns. Volunteers were warned away. Tank existed in a state of high stress and isolation, his chances dwindling with each passing day. He was on a fast track to becoming another statistic, another misunderstood pit bull, euthanized for being too dangerous. A victim of his past and the fear it instilled. Then Jenna arrived. Jenna wasn't just a volunteer. She was a certified canine behavior consultant who dedicated several days, a month, to helping the county shelter assess and work with challenging cases, often focusing on the bully breeds that faced so much prejudice. She had heard about Tank, the highly aggressive pit bull no one could handle. Intrigued and skeptical of labels, she went to observe him herself, approaching his kennel row quietly, long after the morning rush of potential adopters had passed. Tank reacted as expected. The growling, the barking, the lunging. But Jenna didn't just see the surface display. She stood calmly, a safe distance away, her body language deliberately non-threatening, and watched. She noted the whale eye, the tightly pulled lips, the trembling, the way his body recoiled, even as he lunged forward. She saw the frantic scanning of his environment, the hypersensitivity to noise. She saw a dog utterly overwhelmed, panicking, using distance-increasing behaviors as a desperate survival strategy. "He's not aggressive," she murmured to herself, conviction solidifying in her voice. "He's terrified, absolutely petrified." This wasn't a dog confidently trying to dominate or attack. This was a dog considered aggressive due to fear. Jenna knew changing the perception and outcome for Tank would be an uphill battle. She spoke to the shelter manager, presenting her behavioral observations, arguing passionately that Tank deserved a chance, that his behavior stemmed from trauma, not inherent viciousness. The manager was hesitant, concerned about liability and resources, but respected Jenna's expertise and track record. He agreed to give Jenna a limited time, a few weeks, to work with Tank, provided strict safety protocols were followed. It wasn't much, but it was a sliver of hope, a potential second chance. Jenna's initial sessions with Tank were incredibly slow and seemingly unproductive to an outside observer. She didn't even attempt to enter his kennel or handle him. Her first goal was simply desensitization to her presence. She would pull up a chair just outside his kennel run, beyond the distance that triggered his explosive reaction, and sit quietly, reading or working on her laptop, completely ignoring him. She positioned herself sideways, avoiding direct eye contact. When Tank inevitably barked and lunged initially, she remained perfectly calm, didn't react, didn't speak to him. She simply waited until he settled, even momentarily, before quietly getting up and leaving. The message she aimed to convey was, "My presence is predictable, non-threatening, and doesn't result in anything bad happening to you." She did this daily, gradually, over many days, moving her chair incrementally closer, always watching his body language intently, stopping before he reached his panic threshold. If he started to growl or tense excessively, she'd subtly shift her position or avert her gaze further, communicating she understood his discomfort and respected his need for space. It was a painstaking process, demanding immense patience. The next step involved counter-conditioning. Jenna started tossing extremely high-value treats towards the back of Tank's kennel without looking at him or speaking. She'd toss the treat and immediately turn partially away or focus on her laptop again. The goal was to associate her presence, and eventually her movements, with something incredibly positive. At first, Tank ignored the treats, too consumed by fear. But eventually, driven by hunger and curiosity, he began snatching them after she seemed otherwise occupied. Slowly, he started anticipating the treats when she arrived, his focus momentarily shifting from pure fear to food motivation. Jenna gradually tossed the treats closer to the front of the kennel, near where she sat. This created conflict for Tank, his desire for the treat warring with his fear of proximity to her. He would often pace, whine softly, before making a frantic dash forward to grab the treat and retreat. Jenna never pushed, never tried to lure him closer, simply let him make the choice. Weeks passed like this. The explosive lunging towards Jenna specifically began to lessen, replaced by tense anticipation for the treats, though he remained highly reactive to other people passing by. A significant breakthrough came when Jenna started offering treats through the chain link on a long wooden spoon, minimizing the perceived threat of her hand. After much hesitation, Tank began taking the treats gently from the spoon. This progressed over many more sessions, 2 taking treats from her hand held flat against the kennel door, fingers still safely outside. Each time he took a treat gently, without panic, felt like a monumental victory against the fear that held him captive. Jenna also worked on desensitizing him to triggers. She recorded the sounds of clanging gates and shelter noise, playing them back at extremely low volumes during their sessions, paired with high-value treats, gradually increasing the volume as he remained calm. She simulated movements outside his kennel, like shuffling feet or dropping a object, always pairing it with positive reinforcement, helping him build resilience and predictability. Recognizing the limitations of the stressful shelter environment, Jenna advocated strongly for Tank to be moved. With the manager's reluctant agreement, Tank was transferred to a quieter isolation block, away from the main kennel noise and foot traffic. The change was noticeable. While still wary, the constant high-level anxiety began to subside slightly. He had more moments of relative calm, allowing Jenna to make more progress. She eventually gained enough trust to safely enter his kennel run, always moving slowly, predictably, keeping sessions short and positive. She introduced targeting, teaching him to touch his nose to her hand for a reward, giving him a predictable way to interact and earn reinforcement, empowering him with a sense of control. She worked on voluntary muzzle training, associating the basket muzzle with positive experiences, crucial for safe handling during vet checks or future introductions. Getting a leash on him was another months-long process of gradual desensitization, starting with just showing him the leash, then touching him with it, then clipping it on for a split second, always paired with high-value rewards. Slowly, tentatively, the dog, buried beneath the layers of fear, began to emerge. Tank started greeting Jenna, not with frantic barking, but with a softer whine, a wiggly body, and hopeful eyes focused on her treat pouch. He learned to walk, nervously at first, but with increasing confidence, on leash in a secure, quiet yard, sniffing intently, his powerful body moving more fluidly as his tension eased. He discovered the simple joy of a Kong stuffed with frozen peanut butter, occupying him for ages, providing crucial mental stimulation. One day, during a quiet moment in the yard, Jenna tossed a sturdy rubber toy gently. Tank watched it land, then, astonishingly, nudged it with his nose, picked it up awkwardly, and carried it a few steps before dropping it, looking slightly confused but intrigued. Playfulness, a behavior likely extinguished by his past trauma, was flickering back to life. He started soliciting gentle affection from Jenna, leaning his heavy head against her knee, emitting soft sighs that sounded less like stress and more like contentment. He allowed her to give him slow, gentle scratches on his chest and shoulders, places less likely to trigger fear memories. The dog, considered aggressive, was revealing a surprisingly sensitive, gentle, and eager to please nature, hidden for so long beneath the suffocating blanket of fear. Finding an adoptive home for Tank was the next, perhaps greatest, challenge. He was a pit bull, a breed facing significant prejudice and restrictions. He had a documented history of aggression. He would always require careful management, experienced handling, a quiet environment, and slow introductions to new people and situations. He wasn't a dog for a first-time owner or a busy household. Jenna and the shelter knew his placement needed to be perfect, prioritizing his safety and well-being above all else. They prepared for the possibility that he might remain in long-term foster care or sanctuary. But then came Mike and Chloe. They were an experienced couple who had owned and loved bully breeds before, understood positive reinforcement training, and were specifically looking to adopt a dog with behavioral challenges, wanting to make a real difference. They had followed Tank's progress updates, shared cautiously by Jenna online. They saw the videos not just of his fearful reactions, but of his breakthroughs, his gentle moments with Jenna, his burgeoning potential. They weren't deterred by his breed or his past label. They were moved by his resilience and his story. The introduction process was managed with meticulous care over several weeks. Mike and Chloe met Tank initially with Jenna present in a neutral, secure area. They followed Jenna's instructions implicitly, ignoring Tank initially, letting him approach them on his own terms, offering treats indirectly, speaking softly, moving predictably. Tank was initially wary, sticking close to Jenna, but he didn't resort to his old explosive behaviors. Gradually, he began taking treats from them, allowing brief, gentle touches. They demonstrated patience, understanding, and the calm confidence Tank needed. It was clear they were committed to providing the safe, structured, loving environment he required. It felt like the amazing second chance Tank deserved was finally within reach. Making the transition to their quiet home required careful planning, maintaining routines, and ongoing support from Jenna. There were bumps along the way, moments where Tank's old fears resurfaced, but Mike and Chloe handled them with patience and skill, reinforcing his coping strategies, celebrating his bravery. Today, Tank is thriving. He's transformed from the terrified dog lunging behind kennel bars into a cherished companion. He enjoys long walks in quiet nature areas, snoozes contentedly on the sofa between his favorite people, and even engages in goofy play sessions in his secure backyard. He will likely always carry the imprint of his past. He remains cautious with strangers and needs ongoing management. But the dog, considered aggressive due to fear, has proven that label profoundly wrong. His amazing second chance story is a powerful testament to the importance of accurate behavioral assessment, the transformative power of patient rehabilitation grounded in understanding fear, and the incredible resilience of dogs, even those burdened by stereotypes and trauma. Tank's journey reminds us that behind fearful displays often lies a desperate need for safety, and that, with the right help, even dogs deemed hopeless can learn to trust, heal, and embrace the loving future they all embrace, the loving love of they all of de lev. They are po, ku, by, proud, kaspure, kana, pride of, pa, bow, pa, to give, it, of a, to of a, abuse the worst why but if at all they will but if they you you or to be